In the grand scheme of the medical school application process, the AMCAS Work and Activities section sometimes gets overshadowed by things like MCAT scores, GPA, recommendation letters, and the personal statement. I'm here to tell you that you should not underestimate the importance of the Work and Activities section. You might be thinking of it as a simple list of your experiences, but it's much more than that. In this video, I'll be addressing 16 of the most frequently asked questions we receive from med school applicants about the Work and Activities section. Questions like, which details should I include? How do I list my hobbies? And how do I choose my most meaningful experiences? By the end of the video, you'll have everything you need to make sure your AMCAS Work and Activities section highlights all of the skills, experiences, and accomplishments that make you an excellent candidate for med school. Before we jump into the Q&A, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on all the new content we'll be sharing as you navigate your med school admissions journey. Also, a quick note for applicants using TMDSAS or AACOMAS. Although this video will be focusing on the AMCAS Work and Activities section, most of my answers here also apply to the personal biography and activities section of the TMDSAS application and the experiences and achievements section of the AACOMAS application. If you're looking for more info on either of those applications, check out the in-depth TMDSAS and AACOMAS guides on our website. Alright, let's start with the basics. Should I use bullet points or describe my activities in complete sentences? First of all, try to avoid thinking of the Work and Activities section as a resume. It's true that you'll be working with a strict limit of 700 characters, including spaces, for most of the activity descriptions, plus an additional 1,325 characters for the 3 experiences you designate as your most meaningful. But don't let that tempt you to use overly general language or excessive abbreviations. Instead, you'll need to be that much more strategic about which experiences you do and don't choose to include and how you choose to describe them. That said, it's often a good idea to vary the format depending on the experience. When filling out an experience description for a publication, bullet points might make more sense. For most other descriptions, although you won't have room to craft a whole narrative arc, you can still keep things engaging by telling bite-sized stories using the most relevant details. You might be wondering though, what are the most relevant details to include in my Work and Activities section anyway? Well, that leads us to our next question. Which details should I include? One of the reasons it's so important to give yourself plenty of time to complete the Work and Activities section is because you'll need to write, revise, and rewrite most of your experience descriptions. If you're feeling especially constricted by the character limit, I recommend writing out everything that comes to mind about an experience. Then, carefully combing through your writing to determine which details are necessary for answering the following questions. What were your responsibilities or accomplishments? What skills did you use or learn? What strengths did you develop or demonstrate, and what impact did you make? Any details that go beyond the answers to these questions are probably unnecessary for a 700-character description. Also remember that some important details can be left out of the experience description if you've already mentioned them in the experience type, experience name, organization name, and hours fields. If you still have lots of leftover details that you can't squeeze into the character limits, write those down and save them for later. They're going to come in handy when you start pre-writing your secondary essays. During the pre-writing process, while you wait for med schools to start sending out your secondary applications, you can visit our Secondary Essay Premium Example Hub to browse over 1,000 example essays for every single prompt required by med schools in the US and Canada. Still, you may find yourself struggling to revise some of your descriptions down to 700 characters. That might be a sign that you should consider selecting it as one of your 3 most meaningful experiences. But applicants tend to wonder, how do I choose my most meaningful experiences? Some applicants spend way too long analyzing which experiences they think adcoms will find most interesting or impressive. But in reality, as long as you've done a solid job writing your experience descriptions, adcoms will draw their own subjective conclusions about which experiences they find most interesting or impressive. You can't read their minds, and that's okay. So here's the secret to avoiding all that unnecessary stress. Just choose the 3 experiences that you feel were most meaningful. Make sure that at least one of them is directly related to medicine, but beyond that, anything goes. If you're still struggling to narrow it down to 3, ask yourself the following questions. Which experiences did I get the most joy out of? Which experiences caused me to learn and grow the most? Which experiences significantly changed or challenged my perspective? Which experiences helped clarify my personal or professional goals? And which experiences do I wish I could continue even after starting med school? Once you've made your selections, answer some of the following questions using the extra 1,325 characters you've been given for the most meaningful experience summaries. Why did this experience bring me joy? In what ways did I learn and grow? How was my perspective changed or challenged? And which personal or career goals did this experience help me formulate? Another question applicants often have while choosing their most meaningful experiences is, if I mention an experience in my personal statement, would it look bad if it's not one of my most meaningful experiences? Based on some of the advice I've already provided, you may know the answer to this one. You do not have to select an experience as one of your most meaningful just because you mentioned it in your personal statement. If you feel so strongly about one or more of your most meaningful experiences that your personal statement would be incomplete without them, great. This is often the case, but there's nothing wrong with taking your personal statement in a different direction. There's no singular formula for a great personal statement. If you're looking for examples of a variety of compelling personal statements, check out our personal statement premium example library. Now, before we move on from the most meaningful experiences, let's briefly address one other common question I get on this topic. Do I need to get a recommendation letter related to each of my most meaningful experiences? The short version of this answer is no. ADCOMS won't expect your recommendation letters to come from someone involved in your most meaningful experiences. Still, it often happens that an applicant's most meaningful experiences involve the close connections they've formed with researchers, professors, or mentors. In this case, of course it would make sense to request letters from these individuals. The most important thing when it comes to recommendation letters is that the person writing them knows you very well and can authentically vouch for your character, work ethic, or personality. And while it's important to choose your recommendation letter writers extremely carefully, the process of choosing contacts to name in your work and activities entries is much more straightforward. It may be the case that for a few of your experiences, you never got to know your supervisor very well. In this situation, applicants often ask, will medical schools contact the people I've listed as contacts? With the vast number of applications ADCOMS have to sort through, it's highly unlikely that a medical school will reach out to a contact you named in your work and activities section. So if there's a volunteer coordinator or research supervisor you listed but don't know very well, don't sweat it. In the rare case that a medical school reaches out to one of your contacts, they won't be asking for a reference. They'll just want to confirm that you did, in fact, participate in the activity or role. Additionally, if one of your contacts happens to have written a recommendation letter for you, listing them on the work and activities section will help ADCOMS easily connect the dots between these two components of your application. On a related note, some applicants worry, does AMCAS verify volunteer hours? Like with contacts, medical schools simply don't have the time to verify each applicant's volunteer hours. It's okay if you have to do a bit of estimating. If you're honest and as accurate as possible when calculating your volunteer hours, you should have nothing to worry about. The only circumstance in which your hours might be called into question would be if they seem unreasonably high when taking into account the time required for all of your other commitments. On the topic of community service and volunteering, let's discuss another common question. Should all of my community service and volunteer experiences be related to healthcare? You'll notice that there are two separate categories for community service/volunteer experiences, a medical/clinical category and a not medical/clinical category. Take this as a clear sign that medical schools want to know about all of your community service and volunteer experiences, even the ones that aren't explicitly related to medicine. These experiences can go a long way in demonstrating your commitment to serving others, an essential quality in a future physician. However, at least one of your community service or volunteer experiences should fall into the medical/clinical category, and even better if you were directly involved in patient care. These experiences are really the only way to get a clear understanding of what it's like to interact with and serve patients. Including them in your work and activities section conveys that you know what you're getting yourself into and that you're ready and willing to take on the responsibilities associated with becoming a physician. As a college student, or especially as a college graduate, if you've taken gap years between undergrad and med school, you likely have also had the opportunity to gain clinical experience through paid work. Some med school applicants in this situation have asked me, do my medical experiences have to be unpaid for ADCOMS to view them favorably? The truth is, ADCOMS don't favor unpaid medical or clinical experiences over equivalent paid experiences. While it's important to include both clinical and volunteer or community service experiences in your work and activities section, they don't necessarily have to overlap. ADCOMS won't frown on your having earned money for gaining medical experience. Beyond community service, volunteering, and clinical experience though, you'll have space to share far more information about how you filled your hours outside of the classroom. As you prepare to complete the work and activities section, it's important to know the answer to the following question. How many work and activities categories are there to choose from? As of 2024, there's a brand new category in the AMCAS Work and Activities section called Social Justice/Advocacy, which brings the total number of categories up to 9. Here's the full list. Artistic endeavors, community service/volunteer, medical/clinical, community service/volunteer, not medical/clinical, conferences attended, extracurricular activities, hobbies, honors/awards/recognition, intercollegiate athletics, leadership, not listed elsewhere, military service, paid employment, medical/clinical, paid employment, not medical/clinical, physician shadowing/clinical observation, presentations/posters, publications, research/lab, social justice/advocacy, teaching/tutoring/teaching assistant, and other. These 19 categories cover a lot of ground, and although you won't have an experience to share for each of them, you should consider each carefully and make sure you're not forgetting or overlooking any experiences worth mentioning. Keep an eye out for our upcoming video on how to decide which category each of your experiences falls under and how to write great experience descriptions. With all of these categories to choose from, some applicants may want to group some of their very similar experiences together into a single entry. I frequently get the question, can I combine activities into a single entry? This is a great method for some experiences. For example, experiences that warrant more brief descriptions like shadowing or publications can usually be grouped together. The only exception would be if you spent a really significant amount of time on one of them and you require extra space to share specific, relevant details. When filling out the informational fields, including experience name, organization name, and contact title and name for an entry with combined experiences, just input the information for the experience you'd most like to highlight. When filling out the hours field, input the total sum of hours you logged for all of the experiences contained within that entry. Combining experiences can also help you conserve space if you happen to have more than 15 experiences you'd like to include. But aside from shadowing and publications, most other experiences are probably better off listed as their own individual entries. This way, you'll have plenty of space within the allotted 700 characters to provide all of the relevant details without things getting too confusing. If, however, you're concerned that you don't have enough experiences to fill up all 15 slots in the work and activities section, you might be asking yourself, do I need to fill out all 15 experiences? Don't worry. ADCOMS don't expect all applicants to fill every slot. In fact, going out of your way to concoct filler experiences that have little to do with your interests, accomplishments, or skills could actually reflect poorly on you. Most competitive applicants list 10 or more activities, but the AMCAS website clearly states that medical schools care more about the quality of your experiences than the quantity of them. All the more reason to really spend some time polishing those descriptions. While deciding which activities are worth including and which are just filler to be left out, many applicants ask, how do I list my hobbies? How many hobbies is too many? As I mentioned earlier, hobbies do, in fact, get their own category in the work and activities section, so don't hesitate to include them. Whether they're related to medicine or not, describing how you spend your free time can offer ADCOMS insights into your personality and interests that you might not have a chance to mention elsewhere in your application. Any detail that might catch an admissions officer's eye and help them remember you is worth including. As for the number of hobbies you should list, I recommend just 1 or 2. You don't want to take the focus away from your medical experiences. And besides, most applicants are so busy with the rigors of med school preparation that they don't have enough time to significantly invest in more than a couple of hobbies. Another question I often hear from applicants when they're sorting their experiences into categories is, will it look bad if I don't have any leadership experience? It's a valid question. Leadership is definitely an important quality to convey in any application, especially a med school application. But if you've never held an official leadership role, that doesn't mean you've never been a leader. There are lots of ways to embody leadership that don't involve being the president of a committee or spearheading a huge project. Instead, you'll want to make sure that at least a few of your work and activities entries or in categories other than leadership include examples of how you developed and demonstrated your leadership skills. These examples could include things like managing a small team for a research or community service project, mediating a disagreement or dispute between others, or unofficially mentoring someone to help them learn a new skill or role. Once you have a good idea of which experiences you want to include in your application and how you want to describe them, you might start wondering how to organize them. At this point, many applicants ask, in what order will my experiences appear to ADCOMS? Unlike the activities section of the Common App that you probably use when applying for undergrad, you won't be able to sort your experiences by their importance. Instead, your experiences will be listed in chronological order. Some medical schools may also choose to use their own filters for identifying specific types of experiences. As long as your experience descriptions for each entry are top quality, don't worry too much about the order in which they'll be viewed. Think of the work and activities section as a 15-piece puzzle rather than a rank list. Our final question is one that I hear from applicants who are eager to submit their applications as early as possible. Can I add activities after submitting AMCAS? The answer is simple but very important. No, you cannot alter your AMCAS in any way after submitting. It's crucial that you review and re-review your full application a few times before submitting. However, if you want to include experiences in your work and activities section that you haven't yet completed or that you expect to complete in the near future, don't leave them out. Simply denote them as an anticipated experience. Be aware though that you will not have the option of including anticipated experiences for the following categories: conferences attended, honors/awards/recognitions, presentations/posters, and publications. Well, I hope that at this point your burning AMCAS work and activities questions have been answered. If you have a question we didn't cover here, drop it in the comments and we'll be sure to respond. As you can see, the work and activities section is way more in-depth than a simple list of activities and accolades. A well-crafted work and activities section can really enhance your application and provide insight into who you are as a person, both in your personal and professional life. So amidst all your other medical school application priorities, you'll want to set aside plenty of time to brainstorm, write, revise, and finalize yours. For more advice on how to budget your time wisely in your application year, check out the Ideal Medical School Application Timeline Guide on our website. And if you're looking for more examples of successful work and activities descriptions, check out the other AMCAS Work and Activities videos on our channel, as well as the AMCAS Work and Activities Ultimate Guide on our website.